Music licensing reimagined. Artlist.io. Music licensing reimagined. Artlist.io. Music licensing.
All right, let's get started. Second stream of the day. Who knows if it'll be the last. I thought this is going to be a pretty great one. I still stand by that. We will be waiting on GVG, our Lord and Savior, as well as KKirk of Crimson Racing, I think is going to make his PFL streaming debut at some point during the show. KKirk had acknowledged that he wasn't going to be here at the start, and GVG is running a little bit late. So we will certainly get there, and we will get to them. What we can cover in advance of that is I need to pay off the teas on the intentional inbreed reveal of a age 3 filly. And then I have run a bunch of breeding reports, probably 100. We'll see. I don't know what the rough number is, but breeding reports, I kind of queued it in the earlier stream if you caught it, but looking at our Gen 0 females that also made Gen 1 fillies that were retired, so 3-year-olds, and comparing and contrasting breeding reports for the initial mare, so the Gen 0 with Primetime and Churro, and then the 3-year-old with Primetime and Churro, so you can really see where the foal has made progress or fallen back. And obviously the best way to evaluate your horses is going to be on the track, and the second best way is going to be revealed stats when they retire. But this, I think, as long as it's done continuously, and I'll show you how I think about that, even though we're not quite there yet, done continuously might be able to inform you a little bit on your own radials. We talked about stack rates. No two S speeds are the exact same. Well, I guess they can be, but they're not necessarily the same. And then I think it'll inform where maybe you just missed. So you knew what your box and whiskers was for what the breed was going to be. You revealed an A, and obviously you know you missed there. But it could see how improbable that miss might have been at that point. So those are the things that I am certainly going to be paying attention to. It was all done very quickly. I was even clued in that Shockwave was retired after I'd started pulling reports for Gen 1 Colts. So I included that analysis as well. I think everything's right, but I wouldn't be completely shocked if I made a mistake somewhere. If something looks off, we can reevaluate, but we'll go with what we have for now. Open to ideas of sharing the information. Certainly a lot of this stems from me wanting the end users to have the same access to information that I have. I understand that we need to have VIP tiers to incentivize holding multiple PFPs. But I don't think we should do it at the disservice of making it easier for me to do well when we were already going to do well based on our stable size and our stable construction. So with that lead in, I will switch to share my screen and we will get the inbreed reveal out of the way. Shout out to Sly Raven and Sakis in the chat. Man, the Shockwave retirement has me questioning my choices. There's always going to be more horses, Sakis. Don't question your choices. Double down, maybe. So on the screen is Saving Grace. It is our own Grace A+, 20 total boost, 7 total preferences from ticket window, just a not rare fine filly used in it. And then our own ticket window with a very rare fine filly used to make an S20. The team is strongly advised against doing these. I think we're in a position where we have enough fillies where we can experiment a little bit and see if we can maybe show what the outcomes are, maybe even bad. The reason I thought it was a useful experiment is in the little I paid attention to breeding in the betas, we unintentionally some of the early examples were really involved. We took what was an RDF S filly that now resides in Poseidon Racing's barn. It's actually got SS Stamina on the ticket. I think it's the only horse with an SS stat. We bred that to our LDF S at the time, which is Apollo, which is a scuba. Because I have no interest in RDF, I was immediately trying to convert all of these to LDF as quick as possible. By doing it as quick as possible, I overlooked the fact that the RDF filly that we're talking about is also a scuba. So we took 2 S scubas, one from LDF and one from RDF, and it revealed an SS stack grade. And I think now in live, we're seeing more variability in stack grades revealed than we saw in either of the betas. You talk to whatever OGs you're comfortable talking to or you rely on for advice, but I think most people would agree. I mean, what's hard is we revealed like 30 today. I bet you some other people had revealed 2 or 3 each. So it's anecdotal examples, but it does seem like when you revealed in beta, you didn't really have the 3 subgrade swings we're seeing in some cases here. So when we did inbreed and we got an SS stat, we thought that was like a real outlier stat. So now we're trying to replicate it or go down trying. What's up, Latuda? So let's see what we got here. This, I mean, even if Olas, GVG, and KKirk join as scheduled, this is probably still the highlight of the stream. Let's be honest. Hold on, I better make it a little bit bigger just to make sure I was running reports, and me running reports at 150% is not very effective. Okay, nothing crazy. Nothing crazy at all, honestly. Actually, pretty consistent looking ticket. Stamina is its best stat. That's not surprising. Stamina is tied for Grace's best stat. Stamina is tied for Pluto's best stat. Grace's worst stat is temper. Pluto's worst stat is temper. The worst stat on the resulting full is also temper. It's an A, same as Grace. Honestly, it's not even that bad. Now, I think part of the reason the team is cautioned against doing these breeds is the compounding effect, because if I breed Saving Grace, the next foal is going to reside somewhere over here on the left when everything moves to the right, and it's still going to be an inbreed because it's already an inbreed at the grandparent level, so it'll be an inbreed at the great-grandparent level. So until that falls off, you're going to have an inbreeding penalty. So in all likelihood, it probably does actually get worse, and it might get meaningfully worse. So really what would have been the, pun intended, saving grace is if it would have revealed like an SS stat grade that you could then use, because even if you had an inbreeding penalty, if it somehow made SS start and it's a LTS piece and start doesn't really exist at LTS, if you could have that SS start because it was a wonky weird outcome from inbreeding, and we'd looked at the breeding report for this previously, you can find it on another stream, but the box and whiskers were very wide for all the stat grades and wider to the bottom but still wide up top. So I thought it was a gamble worth taking, but now I think in a couple generations this one will probably go off as a bit of a lost cause, would be my guess. And that's not the end of the experiment. We've got two more that are 2-year-olds now. Blood Moon out of Eddie Pocono Racing Stable was made with the actual serial number on the ticket was 7378. We owned that for a while. Ghost owned it for a while. We both used it a fair bit. And we inbred because a lot of the LTS comes from 7378. So I'll be looking forward to see those next season. But this didn't end up being the shocking result that I would have expected. But it is what it is. So we'll transition into what we may know as Neigh-t School, or Neigh as in what a horse would say, struck with the balance of Neigh-t School. Working on it, phrasing, obviously, continuous improvement, just like the team. But this is going to be hard to look at first. We'll talk through it. Don't be overwhelmed. But I'm going to make this bigger as well, because you really only need to look at probably half of it at a time. Just want to make sure. Okay. News to me that when you share your screen, it does not share the window when you don't use Chrome. Oh, if I would have done entire screen, that would have worked. Shout out to Poker Player. That inbreed was basically average throughout the grades, right? Yeah, it's almost as if it wasn't an inbreed at all, if you want my honest opinion on it, which probably is what most people are here for. We'll go even a little bit bigger now that we've got this pulled up. One more. Okay. So I previewed it on this stream. We talked about it a little bit on the last stream. I think the ways to analyze horse outcomes is compare generation over generation, trying to hold something constant. We're going to start with the colts. That's probably the harder way to start because there's more going on here. Once we get to the fillies, those are more straightforward in how they're set up and what you're trying to analyze. But I ran breeding reports for every combination that you see in the upper left. I get it's probably small, but I ran a breeding report with Primetime and Sage. Then I ran a breeding report with Sage and Shockwave. Sage's first foal was named Sage Advice, so I ran a breeding report with Primetime and Sage Advice. And then I ran a breeding report with Sage Advice and Shockwave. Similar concept for Rose and Rosebud. Again, Rose is the Gen 0, Rosebud is the Crop 1. Same thing for Goat and Goat's Head Soup. Gen 0, Crop 1. Now, all of these mares are RRs. That's what we have access to. But they're all RTF pieces. And what we know about RTF is that their highest stats tend to be in start and in stamina. Primetime and Shockwave, and as we get to the other ones, are RDF pieces. So this is not a perfect analysis. If I had RDF pieces, even like 4, I could probably pull together a better analysis. I don't have that because where I said RTF has strong start and strong stamina, RDF tends to have start and speed, unless it's one from Scuba. So if you were comparing apples to apples, RDF and RDF, you'd probably see a better representation, but I still think this is useful when we're saying our constants in this case are the mares. For each of these 4 studs we highlight, so we got Shockwave, Aspire Higher, Jotaro Kujo, and Warlord. We ran the same 6 fillies against it. For Warlord and Jotaro Kujo, which I'm just going to refer to as Kujo going forward, we didn't include Goat and Goat's Head Suit because those both include a scuba, and that would have been inbreeding, and I think that just clouds the analysis a little bit. So every time you look through these again, we ran the combination of, what is that? It'd be 12 breeding reports. They're overlaid on top of each other. So what you're seeing is 6 tables, but it's 6 tables containing 12 reports. And like I said, I do not give 2 shits about the preference outcomes here. I'm not going to make these breeds happen. The reports are run to say what has changed in the sire from going from prime time to what is now Shockwave. Is Shockwave better or worse than prime time? Is it conclusive? Is it inconclusive? And if you run a breeding report for your RDF filly, you may get different results. The hope is that when I ran this large of a sample and did it for 4 sires that were in the stud barn, all at the S level, we might be able to pick out some patterns. And since I put this together in less than 2 hours, I'm really looking and analyzing it for the first time. So as we dive in, the Gen 0 is always going to be in red. So Primetime is the Gen 0 horse that made Shockwave. Shockwave, the Gen 1 or Crop 1, is going to be in blue. Where the horses overlap, when you combine red and blue, you get purple. So now we are getting some art or science involved in this process. So hopefully you didn't learn something there, but if you did, hats off to you. But when you dive in here, we can see that Primetime, again, is a generation further. We think horses are going to improve over time. But if I just take Sage versus Sage with Primetime, Sage with Shockwave, it appears to me fairly conclusive that, again, in a box and whiskers, the box represents 50% outcomes, 25% above the box, 25% below the box. If we simply look at start, the most likely outcome is that breeding with Primetime, as opposed to breeding with Shockwave, would give you better start. Now, it's very clear based on this graph that the range of outcomes is wider for Shockwave, both to the good, the whisker extends past the good of Primetime, and to the bad, the whisker extends past the outside of Primetime. You see a somewhat similar dynamic in speed, but the entire box for Primetime is within the box for Shockwave. And if the worst outcome, it might be a little bit hard for you guys to see, but the worst outcome for Shockwave looks to be within the box of the 50 percentile, looks to be a little worse than Primetime's. It's negligible. And the best outcomes, within the box, are better objectively than Primetime's. Same dynamic. Whiskers are wider to the bad, whiskers are wider to the good with the Gen 1 colt. Again, keep in mind, this is a Gen 0 filly with the Gen 1 colt in blue, Gen 0 colt in red. The next one down, you get a little more deviation finally. Shockwave seems to have better stamina. I can make that as a takeaway because the 50 percentile outcomes are almost called 60% better than the 50 percentile outcomes of Primetime there. That math equation doesn't make sense, but I'm saying they only overlap for about 40% of Shockwave's box there. And for the first time, you're seeing on the low end of the stamina outcomes, Shockwave's worst possible outcome out of 1,000 tries or whatever it is still meaningfully better than Primetime's worst possible outcome out of, say, 1,000 tries. And his best outcome is better than Primetime's. So that is fairly conclusive, in my opinion, that Shockwave has better stamina than Primetime. Now, what I don't know, because I really threw this together about as fast as I could, is if I go to breeding and I actually pull up Shockwave, watch it not be in there anymore. That'd be funny. One breed. Okay, it's got SS minus stamina, so maybe we're not even breaking news. Yep, and Primetime has S plus stamina, so it bears itself out in the stack rates. But I think you're going to have ones that you can make similar conclusions on, which don't bear themselves out. So if you go down to finish looks a lot like start. Primetime's box is better. Its range of outcomes are narrower. Heart, Primetime's outcomes are better. Its top end of the margin is better, and its low end of the margin is also still better. Temper, interestingly enough, is where I would make another case that marginally Shockwave is better. The worst part of the box shows Primetime. The best part of the box shows Shockwave. The best outcome is Shockwave. The worst outcome is technically Primetime, although that one is super close. We're going to go down. We're going to switch horses. So Sage was an A RTF Gen 0. We're going to stick with Gen 0. This will be Rose instead. This is an A plus RTF filly. So in large part, the analysis should work the same. The reason I chose different stack grades was to say that once we get to the Gen 1s, when we bred Sage, which was an A, its first foal was an S minus. So if I'm doing generation over generation, of course the breeding reports for the Gen 1 foal of Sage, or Sage Advice in this case, is going to look better. So when you get down to Goat and Goat's Head Soup, both of those horses are S's. So you could probably take away a little bit about maybe Goat's Head Soup is better or worse than Goat, but it's not as conclusive as, of course, Sage Advice is going to be better than Sage. So if we go back down to Rose again, Gen 0 RTF 8 plus, we're seeing the same dynamic play out. So the best part of the box at start for Sage was Primetime. Same thing here. Better outcome is Shockwave. That's no different. The worst outcomes are much closer than they were for Sage, but that could just be the individual horse. Speed, I would call in favor of Shockwave. That's the same. Stamina is obviously in favor of Shockwave. That's the same. Finish, the boxes almost entirely overlap, but the spread is much tighter for Primetime. I want to make sure that is different. So that is kind of horse dependent there. I would say the boxes for Finish, when we were looking at Sage, were about the same size in total. Now, Primetime had the better of it, but now when we go down to Finish, like the best 50 or the middle 50% of Primetime fits entirely within the box of Shockwaves, but it's not better. I mean, of the 50 percentile outcomes, like that high end of the 50%, it's probably the same for Primetime and Shockwave. But there are a good portion of that 50% that's to the lower side on Shockwave. Top outcome looks to be almost identical. Bottom outcome still says Shockwave is the lesser breeding option at that point. Heart, is that the same? Almost exactly the same. Bottom end is tied this time as opposed to being differentiated like it was above. And then on Temper, again, because the horse itself is different, meaning Sage versus Rose, you might see slightly different outcomes. And in this case, it's more conclusive that Shockwave has better temper than Primetime. I'm willing to make that statement. Let's go down to GOAT again, a Gen 0 SRTF. But let's see if anything changes. Now, I think a key distinction between GOAT and Rose and Sage is GOAT is from a 1 of 1. So you may see some stuff that is different in the cases of Rose and Sage. They both have a couple matches. I'm guessing they were both 2 match horses, maybe 3 in the case of Sage. Nothing crazy, no 4s or 5s. But where Sage, I think, was probably like a 22 total boost, maybe. Rose was like an 18.5 total boost, and GOAT would have been 18.5 or something like that, but no matches, obviously, being from a 1-on-1. So if we just compare GOAT versus Rose, we can see the start box is basically the same. Primetime edges it out ever so slightly. Speed, this one actually looks a little bit different than a structure we've seen. I feel like, at least. Yeah. So it's a very small box, really, for both of the sires, Primetime in particular. Shockwave has it covered in entirety. Again, just looking at the boxes here, the range of outcomes is almost nearly always wider for Shockwave, but more favorability to Shockwave speed. We saw some favorability to Shockwave speed here. We saw some favorability to Shockwave speed there. So if we go back and say, well, does Shockwave on the ticket have better speed than Primetime? He does. S plus versus S. So, I mean, we've only looked at 3 horses compared, but it seems like, looking at that, maybe the radials aren't as wide as we think they are if you're only looking at the 50 percentile outcomes for these horses. I see Grandpa's Do It Better comment. I will come back to that. I just want to make sure I don't have anything else as a major takeaway from the GOAT one, and then we'll start looking at Gen 1 ones. Stamina is better. In this case, the 50 percentile outcomes almost don't overlap at all. And again, keep in mind, GOAT would have been from a Scuba, which had its best attribute be stamina for sure in all of the archetypes. There's some overlap at stamina with Rose. There's some overlap with stamina with Sage. But yeah, for GOAT, they really don't overlap almost at all. Finish kind of looks a lot like start. Again, wider outcomes in totality for Shockwave. The 50 percentiles are kind of overlapping, but Shockwaves would have the worst of it. And then Heart has always tended to favor Primetime, and does so again. One more quick look at Shockwave versus Primetime. Heart, yeah, is an S on Shockwave, and it's an S plus on Primetime. So again, what you're seeing in the breeding report overlay is what you're seeing in the stack grades. Nothing earth-shattering there. I still think it's a useful exercise, and it gets very useful when you do the filly side of it. I see I've got KKirk in the background here, so I'm going to try and get through this last one here. Heart and Temper look pretty similar to what we saw for the other two. Heart favors Primetime, Temper favors Shockwave. We will come back to that. So call it recess for a little bit while we bring up the legend, the man himself, KKirk from Crimson Racing. What do you know, KKirk?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a group effort to try to get you to stream, I think. So I'm pleased to get you up on this one, at least. You were on with Doughboy once, right?
I think so. Once or twice, yeah. But
yeah, I misspoke earlier saying it was
not enough hours in the day.
No, for sure not. But at least you don't have to spend them all grinding horses, right?
That is a good thing.
what's interesting with Crimson Racing these days? I know you have one great horse. Is it just one?
One really good horse. I retired and bred my first horse today, so big news there. So we were only at two fillies today. Retired and bred one that GVG sold me a few months ago. Not really a great racer, and we should look at it. It's got a pretty cool distribution now that we saw the grades on some of the stats there.
Someone call it cool.
I'd love to get your take on it. Obviously, I'm super new, but I bred this one today, so we should go through it.
Yeah. I mean, my initial thoughts are, and you talk to some of the right people, and Ghost tends to hate temper as a racing stat. I think as a racing stat, I still kind of agree with him. I think it's a useful breeding stat, and having your potentially second best stat being temper could explain relatively poor performance on the track. I mean, the other thing you have to keep in mind is just the log jam that is RDF, where this horse is, or at least the initial parent was, if we go back to it.
Should be sprinter, lean.
Yeah.
Kind of the original thought.
But even still, so if we look at the best case breeding outcome from a Gen 0 breeding would be putting the two S26s together, right? In your case, you got an S, but you didn't put, neither of the parents were S in grade. And that is a good thing in some respects, because on the colt side, you didn't use a 101. Now, obviously, you used one on the filly side, but you still have options. You've got the grade, you've got good preferences. So it's a workable piece. And in that sense, one, I'm not surprised it wasn't a good racer, because there had to have been 50 better combinations on paper of S20 plus S20 equals S. Like, it would have been really hard for me to understand how you were going to dominate on the track. But when you take S minus temper, combine that with A plus temper and get S, and if we think temper is breeding consistency, and that's just best guess at this point, we certainly do not know that. I don't think anybody knows enough to make a statement on it as a fact. But to me, it makes it a more interesting breeding piece. You're missing heart, which we think is like majors or 12 horse races that completely fill every time. And finish isn't really that relevant if you're trying to make a sprinter. Now the question goes back to the log jam of, okay, you have the stats probably in the right place. You achieved a grade up. How do you move forward from here? So you probably can use a Ziggy one, like you said, take GVG up on his offer, and Ziggy's prefer a sprint wherever they exist.
Which is what I did, if you want to check that out.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So I bred today. I retired and bred with Zeus. So that was the horse GVG owned as part of the deal to get me this one. He gave me a free breed there. So shout out to the GOAT, the legend. But I took him up on that today.
For sure, as you should. Yeah, so then I think you got no-brainer options there. You should almost should have made that contingent on you getting a filly outcome. Like, you get free breeds after free breeds until you get a filly.
I took enough advantage of him, so I'm happy with the one. I'll find something else next time.
I think that's the next step, and I think you probably do repeat it on the Ziggy side until you get a filly, because then I think your next option either becomes expensive or doesn't exist yet. Because if you have A plus finish as an S, like, to me, I wouldn't even pursue going for longer distances, which means I wouldn't pursue breeding with the scuba. You can, it's an S, but you're going to sacrifice start and speed in particular, for sure. You're going to end up averaging out all your stats, and that's not going to have any outlier stats. So I think you do have to, like, really hone in on trying to make the offspring of this a true sprinter, and start where it's easiest. Start with Ziggy till you get another filly, and then once you're breeding that filly you got, then you probably go to like a primetime foal or primetime himself or something else that we don't even know exists yet. Because again, when we're talking about breeding a filly outcome from this, one it'll
Right,
be
we're
born
months.
next. Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of examples of stuff that could come up. Sorry, like a noob, I should have taken this comment off the screen a long time ago. But I think this is a good starting spot for your stable. And then you got impatient.
Doughboy put in the sorry, Stens. Doughboy
No,
put
go
into Ace King next month.
I agree with that.
That was one Ghost was talking about too. So I think that was certainly one I was going to look into next month. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Ziggy. It's the one that's better than Zeus. Funny enough, all of these RDSs have more or less come through our stable. So we own Zeus. We traded it to Balthazar. Balthazar sold it or traded it to GVG. So we've seen all these horses at some point or another. It went by Randall Cunningham and Beta V1, and then they're prominent in our stable after that. So.
I can't believe you didn't stick with the naming convention. I'm disappointed.
Like what we have now has worked a little bit, but that was kind of fun for a while. Like I probably shouldn't have changed sports every time, but once you get enough horses, God, it's hard to name horses. Like
90s baseball players.
Yeah, that's not bad. And shout out to Valentere, YSM minority owner. His stable was named crap 90s football players, and he meant football in the wrong term of football, but it was funny to have something like that and just use it as a theme where you can kind of think of players you hadn't thought of in 20 years probably. But to not bury the lead, you got impatient with the breed up slow strategy of parking an asset for several months at a time without much success on the track, and made a splashy purchase, which everybody loves and appreciates. 700,000.
700, yeah.
You even helped the rest of the community out by contributing 35,000 in Derby stimulus for the season. So,
wish I could have avoided that part, but
we're appreciative of the effort. But yeah, a horse that I should have looked at the date you bought it. It had run a couple times. You didn't buy it brand new.
It ran at least a handful, certainly enough to know that it was very good, but still not enough to know it might have been as dominant as it was.
And if you have to step away at any time, just let me know.
I'm trying to see if my wife will grab her. Sorry, we're dealing with a sick kid.
You're fine. Yeah, so I mean, let's say you had a population of 5 races, you'd add 4 wins in a second, and none of them are 4 horse fields. They're not 12 horse fields either, but it was pretty obvious it was very good. I think it was going up against the true best. Even though this is an S, I think it raced against S pluses plenty of times.
Yep.
You had your first,
probably others.
Yeah. You had your first big race of the new season today. Bigger
and
field.
The first non-podium in 22 races. That's the first time finishing outside the top 3. That's crazy. So not a great start to the new season, but it was inevitable at some point. Although I'm pretty sure it's not, a long distance runner. It had survived until now, but this was a 10 furlong. I don't think that's a sweet spot. It's certainly going to be much toward the sprint side. So
excuses, if you think all of the horses are more or less predisposed, at least for the Gen Zeros, to run longer distances, then when you bring yourself back into competition with Tellernut and Nightcrawler, which were prominent Gen Zero horses, Perlino and other prominent Gen Zero horses, it's not surprising in that sense that it wouldn't have done well there. Now, Can Pork Chop seems to just be a monster horse, and losing to that is just the cost of business at that point.
And we've beat that horse twice. I've beat that horse twice. So, the few times it's lost, it's been to All That Jazz. So that's at least good to see that it can happen out there. We've raced a bunch at this point.
Yeah, just pulling this one up.
That's quick. A great horse.
Yeah. And you both, do you have the same bloodlines more or less? Is it Bear Ghost? And that's K2. Obviously, you don't have the same filly.
They're not the same, but I don't know all the names and whatever.
I think it's Bear Ghost. Oh, it is Big Balls. Okay, never mind.
Big Ball, yeah.
So then you take that to a Scuba next.
Yep. That's the plan. Most likely this week. I'll probably retire her. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'm going to race at least a few more times, but that was kind of my tentative plan, was by the end of the week make that happen. It just seems too valuable not to.
It's really hard to not. Our best LTS asset currently on the Philly side, or at least racing eligible side, is an S, and it's not a good one. So by you racing this another season or two, you're letting me breed Gen 1 results, which was an S LTS Philly with another S, and then maybe I get an S plus. Now, certainly I can't race that for another 3 months at that point. But I think the biggest factor is where you are in the population when it was that population. So if we had, let's say, I don't know, of 3-year-olds and up, are there 7,000 horses, something like that, 8,000 horses maybe? 3 months from now, we're going to have more than 8,000 horses. Now, there's not going to be rampant inflation. I'm not that worried about that. But a horse like this, if it was running 3 months from now, which wouldn't be too far out of its peak, it'd be 6 maybe. You'd probably stop it at the end of the 4-year-old season no matter what. But you're then one of, let's call it, 15,000 horses as opposed to one of 7,000 horses. And at that point, you've kind of devalued your own asset. In exchange, you're winning on the track and probably continuing to have some success. The other risk there is you don't know where you're at on the aging spectrum of, is your record indicative of big balls or a moo having an early peak? Do they both have an early peak? Will one fall off? So there's some risk in continuing to keep it to run, and that's why I think I probably wouldn't. Now, if I only had 2 horses in my stable and one was the retire and breed it up slow, God, I'd be awfully tempted to race it.
So I'm trying to not let that be the deciding factor. I agree with you. I'm like 99% at some point this week retiring her to breed. That's kind of the plan. It just seems like no matter how you weigh it out, let's just say she's the most dominant 3-year-old there is, and I raced all season. The value of the net profits on that probably don't outweigh the breeding value. Plus, to your point, you're kind of compounding your competitive set every month you wait and don't stay ahead of the game trying to breed the best, LT that's out there. So that's kind of my thinking for now. And, if I was seeing results like, 4 or 5 days into the week, she's winning every race and beating all these older horses, that may have changed things, but I'm not assuming that's going to be the case, especially with a, mediocre finish today.
Yeah. What happened to your claiming game or your flipping game? Like, how did you get
so
down
that's
to 2
probably
horses?
where I go. Yeah, once I bought all that jazz, I mean, obviously 700K, we kind of used up all the firepower. So we've been building that up. Obviously on the track, she's done very well to bring a lot back. But I need to have some money too to breed at this point. So that's probably what I'll do. I definitely don't want to go, 2+ months. Well, I guess it's really, is it 3 full months before you can really race?
3 full months. Yeah, it's a kick.
Yeah, so I don't want to go 3 full months with nothing. So I'm not going to rush to just go get something, but I'll at least play the claiming game or just find something that's interesting, or find a foal that's maybe a month away from racing that I can buy as a 1-year-old to get me going for next month. So I don't mind taking a few weeks off if it's the right strategy, but we'll find something for sure.
Yeah, and I think what you hit on there is really smart in that finding a foal that is maybe 1 month off where you're not paying a premium because it's already racing.
Exactly.
But the price maybe hasn't adjusted. I think that's a spot that basically opened itself up today. A lot of people would have had their 0-year-old horses listed Saturday, Sunday. It looks to be 2 full months away from racing, but in reality it was a month and 3 days away from racing. So I don't know if those prices have adjusted, if someone delisted those because they're getting closer to racing or not. If you're going on the full side, I think that's what you do, where I'd previously encourage people to try to find kind of really good S- and S colts that can race, keeping in mind there's going to be attrition, and eventually that ends up in claimers and eventually gets pushed down the scale. I think that window of opportunity is probably closed a little bit, but certainly playing the claimer game is going to be the way a lot of people should go. It's a little time consuming, and sometimes you don't know what you're bidding on. I've been guilty of oh, there's a filly and a claimer, it's an obvious claim. And in some cases, it's not an obvious claim. It just looks good because it's like, I can't believe someone put a filly in a 40K claimer type situation. So I think there's some trouble in that pursuit, but it's the best plan of action for sure. Let's see if we got any coming up.
I'm going to keep my eyes on everything. I haven't been looking, but to your point, I could have probably been looking for those 0 age that were close to, age into 1 last week, but I wasn't. So
I bet you they're still there. I would be really surprised.
It might still be there. I'm not worried about getting like tip top. I just want to have something to at least play around with that, is hopefully reasonably competitive or a good, breeding asset if I went that way. But most likely, we'll see. Most likely something cheaper just to keep me going and have these breeds play out over the next few months.
Yeah. Farming isn't dead, folks. We've got a 4-horse race controlled by one entity. Found a race there. So maybe not your best option to look for a climbing race of something to claim. I'm guessing no one had entered that race with about 10 minutes left. So they took advantage of it. Where do you see your stable in, instead of 5 years, we'll say 5 months? Same difference, right? It's 5 years in the horse's life. How many horses is the right size for you? How many archetypes do you play in? Those types of things.
Yeah, so that's the part I don't have a good answer to. So I know like all of you guys have been around for forever. You've kind of tailored your stables 1, 2, 3, whatever, however archetypes, and it depended a lot on the Gen Zeros that you had and the PFPs you had before that. But for me, obviously, I didn't have any kind of predisposition. I bought the horse from GVG, which was RDF, got the LTS, which is kind of basically completely opposite. So obviously those are kind of where I'm starting. I don't see me completely exiting those because I'm probably, whether I sell things off here and there, those are kind of going to be my baselines. Obviously with all that jazz, maybe having the better likelihood of breeding some really good horses. So that's kind of where I'm staying. I wouldn't be looking for anything in particular. So definitely kind of opportunistic on what might be out there, open for suggestion. I do know like the one thing I've been picking up here and there is the LT side of things might have been kind of a fun place to land with all that jazz because there's not as much competition, it sounded like, from the Gen Zeros, but you can, better than I do there. But so that's one I'm excited to kind of build out, maybe hopefully stay ahead of much of the competition like you kind of highlighted before.
Yeah, and putting my biases on the table, we compete in LTS, RTF, and LDF. So I know those areas very well, but they obviously would financially benefit me if those areas do well. But we did see a weird dynamic come to fruition when GVG joined the game. And I mean, I talked to him on the phone. What's funny is I have partners in our stable that I've never talked to on the phone with. One you would know very, very, very well. The other I've talked on the phone to change the last like 40 digits of a password type of situation, but nothing substantive. So I talked to GVG more than that, and I'm sure I didn't miss that. I didn't think RDF was the best place for him to join the game, but like looking back in retrospect, of course it was the right place for him to join the game because the market had priced it at a discount because of the supply. So many S horses, like how does your horse ever stand out? There's the 2 S26s there. You're not probably competing against them on the track. Maybe you're not even competing in the breeding barns with them. Some of that's played out. I don't think the S26s were crazy on the track, but in the breeding barn, they're certainly doing well. But the other piece of it that I completely missed was where there's supply, there's also supply in the marketplace. So like LTS would have been incredibly picked over at that time. So even if it was the place where it seemed like there was opportunity, or you could use any other example of this, RTS, which I don't compete in it at all, or RDS, which I don't compete in it at all, there just wasn't supply available to buy. So if you were going to come in and do whale things like GVG, like you couldn't have done a different archetype realistically. Like he did some at LDF, and his LDF holdings are better than ours, but he couldn't have done what he did at LDF or at RDF in LDF. So I think each of the archetypes have their strengths and weaknesses, and if you have a piece like you do at LTS, you're best served staying ahead. You're best served not getting cute. I know some people are trying to make left turf firm using their LTS assets, and in your case, like, you seem to think that your horse is a sprinter. The record bears that out a little bit. Once it's revealed, it'll be a lot more obvious, and then you can run some breeding reports on it to even get triple insurance on that this horse is a sprinter. But for me, it would be like a bridge too far to take that great LTS sprinter and bring in LDF, which obviously prefers to sprint as well, but to sacrifice your turf in exchange for that dirt and then soft to get some firm. Like, I just don't know that horse is winning for multiple generations. I don't mean like it's not a one breed stepping stone. Like, I can show you what I think is a one breed stepping stone. Again, this is my own stable. Of course, I'm going to agree with the decision that I made. Goat of Chemistry. People would probably hate the name, but I tried to tie the two together. So Walter White was a chemist, obviously, in Breaking Bad, and our
Best show of
horse
all time
was named Goat, which was not my decision. So what is the best of chemistry? You're the Goat of Chemistry. To me, this is like a one cycle step. Like, I don't expect this horse to be a good racer. No, it's from like the two best right turf marathon horses that probably existed. But by sacrificing what little I had in firm against soft, and that's only changing one preference, I think there's going to be better right turf firm horses, and I think there's going to be better right turf soft horses. Now, the good news is I'm bringing 9924, the ticket window, to RTF. I'm not the only one. Other people even beat me to it. But I can use this as a colt internally to say, if I have already used Scuba, or haven't used Scuba, I guess, but I've already used Astro, which we have, obviously, this is a different bloodline that doesn't really exist there in a meaningful way. So that, to me, changing one preference is plenty, because, like I said, I don't even think this is going to be a good racer.
So remind me, because the reason it's an issue for me is that because there's one archetype that doesn't exist with Gen Zero, right? Is it L?
And it's LTF. Yep.
F? Right.
Yeah.
So because I couldn't go right to that, right, you'd have to go through the D part, and that's where it gets complicated. I agree with you. It's a theory, and I know Ghost was even talking about it with me of potentially going that route, but I think for me, I'd rather take the more sure thing and at least stick with what I have for now before, I don't have a stable the size you guys do either, where you can do these experiments on one side and still be racing and dominating with other things. So for me, I want to kind of try to keep it pretty down the middle, and at least for now. So, you asked me kind of where do I see myself, that, obviously growing, but not getting to some crazy state. I don't have the time to probably manage a stable you have. It would cost a lot of money and whatever to get there. So I'm going to let it kind of naturally evolve where I am now, and then maybe buy a piece or two along the way. So definitely want to stay a little bit more, not necessarily conservative. I don't mind taking risks in breeding, but I don't want to do something completely crazy that, like you said, is going to take multiple generations to flow through.
Yeah. And to really drill your point home, is of our three archetypes, what those three have in common is all three have two parts of LTF. So if we do left dirt firm, that has left and firm. If we do RTF, that has turf and firm. And if we do LTS, that has left and turf. So the idea of the three, or like the triangle, was like to try to get to LTF, and just in the betas, it just didn't seem to be a worthwhile pursuit to me. Now, there are some people.
The key too, with all that jazz too, I mean, the fact that LTF doesn't exist, I can compete in LTF probably amongst the best already, right? The soft versus firm seems to be, at least in my opinion, like, I don't want to say the least important, but I'm the closest. I have very good LNT. I think there's 3 stars on both of them. So, I can compete. I haven't worried about what the turf conditions were going to be racing. So that was also an advantage. Obviously, over time, that will change, but at least for now, that didn't matter.
Yeah, and what we don't know there, because in the Gen Zero racing, and shout out to SoCal, another minority owner of YSM, but has his own stable as well. He was the first to race a known left dirt sprinter, left dirt firm in this case, and left turf firm. And then everybody abused the hell out of that, including me. And the left dirt firm horses were the better horse at left turf firm. But I don't think that had anything to do with the firm preference that you're talking about, the third preference. It had all to do with all LTS pieces of the Gen 0 level preferred to run longer distances. Most of, basically excluding the scuba, the LDF pieces preferred to sprint. So the distance preference was trumping any importance of the actual firm or soft preference.
Makes sense.
What we haven't seen, at least I haven't, I'm not that most observant person in the world, but we have not seen that replicate itself in these crop one horses. Many have tried. We tried a couple as well. The run an LDF sprinter against LTS pieces hasn't worked. And I think your horse is probably a good example of that. Is like LTS horses are just winning LTF sprints. Now, does that change? Does that go away? Is that an aging thing? That shit, we don't know.
Yep. And your guess is better than mine. But, for Jazz, at least in 2-year-old races, I didn't have to be super selective across distances, across, firm versus soft. Now it looks like that probably is changing now, at least with distance preference facing some of these Gen Zeros like we talked about before. But be curious to see how the week goes. I have a race in mind for tomorrow. We'll see. I'm going to wake up and reevaluate to enter something tomorrow, but I'll at least get a few in before I retire her this week.
Yeah, I think the only 2 times you ran on fast in my quick review, you actually, 3 times, but, wow, 4 times. The 4 times you ran on fast, you won every race. Maybe you already have an LTF horse and you don't even know it yet.
Just didn't know. Like you said, though, it's going to be competition. Where are the distances? Who was I racing? Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you. It was good to know that, like, that stuff, it's tough for a beginner who didn't play all the betas, didn't know all the distributions. It was, I think you had told me, Ghost had told me separately, this doesn't exist. You can race here as well. So that was kind of, you can see that distribution. Obviously, the sprint success, I think, especially early on, I think Ghost, before I got her, ran mostly sprint. And then I was kind of piling on wherever, but clearly she could win across the board, at least until you get to the extremes. But that's a pretty nice chart right there.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. This one doesn't suck either, actually. So
Nope.
Slowly but surely getting her back there. Do you have any questions, either yourself personally or questions you would think someone that is newer? Because I get on my high horse on these and talk about things as if everybody already knows them, and that's not always true. So either genuine questions you have or things you think it would be helpful for me to address. I'm putting you on the spot. We didn't talk about any of this shit.
Oh yeah, I know. Nothing. I certainly do. Nothing that I'm thinking of right this second. And I've asked you before, and I've asked in different chats. Questions along the way. I mean, I hear names referenced. I hear traits referenced, and I have no idea what's going on. But it's certainly. And I talked about this on stream with Doughboy. It's well. Good question, Doughboy. At whose peak? May have been the Crimson Chin before the nerf, but yeah. But anyway, I mean, it's a confusing game. I think that's a benefit long term for Photo Finish. It might have a steep learning curve for new people coming in, but I think that's what makes it also not a fad or kind of lightning in a bottle. You got to breed. You got to wait your 3 months. You have to learn, the landscape. You have to know who you're competing with. The more you breed now, you have to know who you can use and who you can't use. I mean, that's, all that jazz is 2 1-of-1s, right? So I'm already learning, hey, that's taken out a ton of availability to breed with, at least for a couple generations for the offspring. So those are the things I think that I'm still learning. People were giving me advice on who to breed jazz with, and I don't know the names of those horses, right? So it's kind of starting from scratch. You come in not knowing anything. So I'm doing a little research here and there for, what scuba I want to go after, because it seems like that's the most likely, at least first breeding match. So, picking up little by little, but you guys have been extremely helpful.
Appreciate that.
Be curious to hear what you think if you're looking right now, but there's 2 that seem to jump out. I'm sure you probably already know without even looking.
Well,
but
we have
there's
one,
two that
so
jump
I don't
out.
think we're not gonna plug ours, and ours
Two
is
that
not
are
priced
available.
to breed with.
Yeah.
So, where did we go here? Yeah, Scuba Puff, which should be Soulmates,
So that's one.
The other one is Aqua Eclipse, yeah, whatever.
Yep, that was the other. So those seem to be the obvious two. I think I know which one I'm going to do, but also, like you said, when I retire Jazz, I'll have a better sense of the distribution of the grades, because, you know, I'm making some assumption that the peak is somewhere. I don't think it's a true sprinter, but it's somewhere closer to sprint, but I want to see how that shakes out. So it will most likely be one of these two that I hit.
Yeah, I think in my experience, these horses aren't as different as they would look. So this is rarity 142. This is 127. Is ours somewhere in between or somewhere outside of that? Let me try to go back and find it. I should not have left that page. Ours
is yours
would
on?
have been, it's Mars out there, but it's not. I mean, you shouldn't pay us. Theirs is cheaper. No, eventually is. There are enough horses that I'm not trying to sell anything is the point. So we're 139. So if you line them up in like rank order, we're actually rarer than Scuba Puff, but not as rare as Hans Holdenworth. But again, the other thing that we don't know the answer to, and this is really getting in the weeds, is the two that I have the most experience with in evaluating is Apollo and the Pellinar Fields. We owned both. It was ranked 48 and ranked 51. That's a 3 rarity difference. Now, does a 3 rarity difference matter more at levels of 48 and 51? Your gut would maybe tell you yes. Then this is ranked 139 and this is ranked 142. So a 3 rarity difference there. Like, I would think at the LDF, it should probably mean more if you're talking things in linear or non-linear fashions. But at this level, I think you just choose based on price. Now, you can run, like, I'll run a couple for you. And that's going to be like the next thing for a different stream is, like, if you want me to use our horses to run examples of breeding reports, I'm happy to showcase a few. I do think people should have them.
That's the hard part too, is deciding if it's worth to pay, because I don't own the PFPs to get them for free.
I don't think
they add up if you're going to pay for a bunch of them.
I think what we'll see is that it's not. So we'll do unique ones. Just bear with me here. Every time I try to do a bunch of stuff on stream, I'm supposed to have good internet, but I do not have good internet. So we'll pull up Ruby with, we did Aqua Eclipse already. So I'll grab the breeding report there. I will grab a different horse with Aqua Eclipse. Let's do Alice, another really strong A+ LTS. You can see I have 1,154 yet to do after running like 100 today. So not going to get through them. I might as well help other people out. What's the other one that I'm missing? Scuba Puff. Let's run the same two.
Because the point here is, even though you're not using my mare, you're at least getting
a good enough proxy. Yeah. And I'm using the same filly, so I'm holding one thing constant. So if something's different, the difference should be on the sire side. Yes.
Right. So at least see that distribution change, right? Watching some football tonight?
I'm not, because I'm streaming, and if I had another screen going other than my own stream, I would. It's probably lagging out already. Well, it's the lag.
No, you're good.
I have to talk to Comcast about my situation. I'm working on the other screen here. I'm going to try to pull these together for everybody really quickly. So if there anything you want to stall with, or if there's any questions in chat, now would be a great time. I can multitask that part, I think.
How many horses did you breed last cycle? I saw you were revealing a ton today, but how many? What was the count?
So we would have revealed like I think 44 is how many Gen Zero fillies we have, but today and starting today, well, I think we'll be done tonight. I would encourage people. I think you do need to consider breeding early. Most times it's been advantageous to wait, and I think certainly there's going to be people that drop the price of their colts late because they can fill them internally and they get a better in-house rate. But we have more fillies that have bred this cycle. As evidence, we go from 44 that we bred this past window to breeding 65 now, so which is too many. So if you want to buy a horse, hit us up. A lot of our stuff is not.
I mean,
not listed. It's just a hassle for us to list it. In most cases, we're just going to run colts and claimers and get rid of them that way.
Hey, Stens, give me a few minutes. My daughter's making
You're
some noise
fine.
again, so I'll be right back.
You're fine. While I'm stalling, no, and I'm talking to them. Yeah. We've got one handy here. We've got the Scuba Puff. Well, that's the wrong analysis. Sorry. Let's do the Ruby one. You guys can just enjoy the lo-fi music, I guess. It takes a little brain power. I did need that. Okay, here's one. Red is Scuba Puff. Blue is Aqua Eclipse. Again, based on like absolute rarity, Aqua Eclipse is a better horse. But if you want to tell me those breeding reports are meaningfully different, I'm not sure I agree with you. Again, the filly's a constant. Aqua Eclipse is blue. Where they overlap is purple, which is virtually everywhere. Scuba Puff is the red horse. Let's run one more for you with Alice since we ran the reports anyways. And I do have disappointing news for the rest of the people that GVG has confirmed he's not able to make it tonight. We didn't have a falling out. He's got something else he's attending to, which sucks. But if you're waiting for GVG, you're going to be disappointed. I forget which color I did as which last time. We're going to do Scuba Puff as red, and then Aqua Eclipse as blue. It's not going to matter. So that's the margins we're talking about in these breeding reports with Gen Zeros. Now, they certainly look wider when we get to Gen 1s. We'll get back to that exercise. I didn't think it was a good use of KKirk's time, and I value his time. But this is why it doesn't make any sense for you to pay more than 4,000 Derby if you don't have to, when, yes, Aqua Eclipse is better, but is it really better? And that's not a shot at Hans's horse. We're the ones that are priced astronomically. You can make a different case of, do you want one that hasn't been used a ton? That's a different argument. In that case, Mars really hasn't been used at all other than us, and I'm fine with that. While we wait for KKirk, I'll refresh the marketplace here. Let's see what we've got. Solid volume. Nothing crazy since the big Kimberly Clark deal. I pulled it up earlier, but didn't have a natural segue for it, so we can look at it now. Shout out to both Ghost and Pocono, but if they wanted to just keep trading stacks, I mean, it's pretty easy. So this is a Moo, which was definitely a JPEG Lord horse. It was like one of the only fillies for sure on the jockey side. I think it's put out two A pluses or two S pluses, and the other one it put out was All That Jazz, which is actually KKirk's horse. So if we go to Mumu, yeah. So in 22 starts, 14 wins, 5 seconds, 2 more on the board. 1 race, 1 win for the next horse, Morpheus. And then Kimberly Clark's got to wait a bit. So does Pink Starburst. Who has these ones? I'm curious. I see your back. I'm looking.
One of these just sold today for like $1 million, right?
The one that's the furthest away from racing, Kimberly Clark, which was a record. 0-year-old horse goes for $1 million. Derby. So again, shout out to all parties involved. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it went from Aqua Eclipse. So maybe that is your.
That's the one I was leaning, but we'll see.
Our Pluto doesn't give him an S plus. That feels bad. No, so I don't know if you saw him. I can pull him back up super quick. So I'm not even going to remember which horse is which, but the comparison on this tab is Alice RA plus with Aqua Eclipse and Scuba Puff, and then this is Ruby with Aqua Eclipse and Scuba Puff. I guess maybe the preferences is weird there, but that's only one horse. The rest is like completely overlapping. Now,
what do you do? Copy the picture and paste them in Excel over each other?
Yeah. Yep. Until I take it away, I guess. And if I was really smart, I would fix the column sizes in Excel so that it would actually act as if you could segment the grades out. But obviously there's nothing there that's going to steer you one direction or another, I don't think, other than price and how many.
So major takeaway was pretty similar.
Yeah, very similar. Your two decision points are: do you compete on price or do you compete on how many siblings are out there? Now, I don't know that siblings really matter that much when you're talking from a one of one to begin with, but if you want to segment it that way, you certainly can.
Makes sense.
All right. Well, I don't need to hold you up. If you got any other questions, I'd love to chat through them.
I wish we had more horses for you to analyze, but I'm getting there. So I flipped a lot. Yeah. That first month I was kind of playing the claimer game. That was fun. Gen Zeros, but next time I come on with you, things might be different. Maybe I'll add 1 or 2 more. So we'll have more to talk about.
For sure.
I'm just excited. I've been seeing you guys, have the fun of breeding. I needed to get in there today, so. Happy to have popped my breeding cherry.
It's fun when you breed a couple horses. It becomes a chore when you have to breed a bunch of horses, and you have to maybe negotiate deals on, if I throw you 20 covers, will you throw me anything back type situations. So, and then naming horses when you have that many is an absolute chore. So we'll be trying to sell some unnamed, I guess, at that point. So.
Well, I might hit you up because I do think I'll be at least in the market for something. So we'll I know you'd be one of the first places I go anyway. So we'll talk. But maybe if you got extra, even if they're not top of the line, I'll be looking for something fun, something with upside, whatever. We'll figure something out.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I appreciate you hopping up. I appreciate you joining, and I'm sorry to everybody else that has to live with KKirk being the best guest because GVG can't make it. So.
Oh, too bad. I know that's a bummer. That's a big letdown, but
it is.
Thanks, Stens. I appreciate it. Sorry we've had to wait this long to do it, but we'll definitely do it again soon.
No worries. Thank you, sir.
All right, man. See you later.
See ya. All right, let's get back into our science assignment of the night. I'm not going to totally rehash it. It's hard to pick up where we left off. I'm going to zoom out a little bit because I think it's big enough for the stream, and I think it's easier to analyze if you can zoom out a little bit. So again, what we were looking at was there are 4 RDF fillies that were in the breeding barn at the time that I started pulling reports. I took 3 different Gen 0 fillies as well as their corresponding crop 1 foals that were also fillies. different age bands. So Sage originated at an A, Rose was an A+, Goat was an S. I ran them with the initial sire, in this case Primetime, and the sire that is on the stud barn, the Gen 1 Colt in the stud barn, in this case Shockwave. We saw in large part with the Gen 0, so for Shockwave, we had gone through this exercise for all three of those. If you missed that and you're tuned in now, go back to the start of the stream. It was more in depth than we're going to do for the rest of it. But if we shift gears, so it was on the Colt side, it was Gen 0 and Gen 1. On the Philly side, it was only Gen 0. If you go over, and I'm going to try to intentionally go further over to exclude looking at the Gen 0 Philly. Again, Shockwave is always in blue. Primetime is always in red. Primetime is the Gen 0. Shockwave is the Gen 1. Sage Advice is a Gen 1. So this is, in the blue example, a Gen 1 Philly with Gen 1 Colt. But it's still not meaningfully different, I don't think. I think if we said Shockwave had better stamina on the ticket or on the revealed stats, it had better start on the revealed stats, that bore itself out. We'll pull it up one more time just to show people, to make sure that I'm not making stuff up, but it certainly was there. We'll probably go for another 30 minutes maybe, for anybody that's curious. And if you got questions, get them in the chat, related or unrelated to this, totally fine. Pull up Shockwave. We'll see how good of an estimate 30 minutes was. I'm guessing I underestimated, but that's my style. So again, going to the Bloodline tab, Shockwave is the Gen 1, Primetime is the Gen 0, better stamina, better speed, same start, same finish. Primetime has better heart. Oops. And Shockwave has better temper. I mean, I think that's definitely at the Gen 0 level. That's what we saw. The Gen 1 level, again, Shockwave better in temper, stamina, speed. Totally out there in plain sight. Primetime had better heart and maybe start. Let's go back to it one more time. Same start on the actual revealed stats. So I think that's an area where you could probably say Primetime actually has better start. That's one case. That's the only case for Shockwave and Primetime's analysis where the stat grade S start actually meaningfully means Primetime has better start. So for Sage and Sage Advice, you see the best part of the box is with Primetime. For Rose, it's closer, but it's still with Primetime. For Goat, it might even be closer yet, particularly in the Gen 1 level, but it's still with Primetime. So that's where I think you can use this overlaying breeding report structure to make a definitive statement that over the course of this sample size, Primetime clearly has better start, even though they are both S starts. And again, it's probably not overly meaningful, but it exists. Going down to Rosebud, again, that is the Gen 1 Philly from Rose. So blue would be an example of Gen 1 with Gen 1. Again, Primetime has the better start. That was where they were both S on the revealed stats. Shockwave revealed better speed, revealed better stamina, revealed better temper. You're seeing that. Heart, we said, was the same as well. Forgive me. No, Primetime had legitimately better heart, and you're seeing that. Better heart, better heart, better heart, better heart. Better heart, better heart. And again, I'm using the boxes. Some people might want to use the whiskers, to each their own. But if you tell me 50% of the outcomes are going to be captured within the box, I care less about what the one outcome out of 100 or 1,000 or whatever the sample size is, the one outcome isn't the outcome you're going to get. At least I don't think I feel as if I'm going to get. You come down to goat's head soup again. This is a case where both goat and goat's head soup were S's. So then you can kind of try to look side to side to see if there's a meaningful difference, because that probably would tell you something about the filly. Now, the rest of this workbook, the non-orange tabs are specific to the filly, and I think that's an easier example to walk through anyways. So I won't spend a ton of time on it, but yes, you're seeing ever so slightly prime time, better start, for sure better heart, for sure better finish here. I want to refresh my memory again on what the finish reveal was. S versus S. So can we conclusively say in finish that prime time is better than Shockwave? Here it would appear so with goat's head soup. With goat, I would still say yes. Now the tops of the boxes are the exact same, but there are a portion of the box further to the left for Shockwave. Same exact thing for Sage. Same exact thing, or sorry, for Rose. Same exact thing for Rosebud, actually. And then actually meaningfully better here on Sage. And the same dynamic we saw for Rose and Goat on Sage Advice. So we've got two examples of, I can say that prime time, even though it has the same stack grade of S start, has better start, and they both have S finish, but I believe prime time's finish is better than Shockwave's. If you want to take those two examples side by side, I would say if the radials are for, let's say, S, if it's 81 to 85, thinking Madden ratings, if you got an 81 to an 85, you're an S. I would say it's more likely to me that Primetime has an 85 start and Shockwave has, let's say, an 82 start. Where finished, they were closer. So if Primetime has an 85 finish, Shockwave might have an 84 finish. In cases where there's a few times where it's just it's a wider box. So is the box wider because of increased variance generation over generation? That's possible as well. I mean, there are enough examples of the Sage outcome clearly having a better outcome on Primetime that makes me think it's not all variance. Some of it can be variance, but it's not all variance. And then on Goat's Head Soup as well. So that is the Colts in an inconvenient nutshell, because we picked it up, we dropped it, we picked it up again. We'll spend a little time going through the fillies. If someone really wants this workbook, I won't give you my fillies, but I'll give you the Colts. Just let me know. So the color coding on the rest of the tabs are based on our archetypes. So if we look at the most useful example is probably going to be, trying to think, maybe LTS and Left Dirt Firm. So if we grab a couple of each here, I structured these ones a little bit differently. Let's go to LTS Ruby. That was the best A+ LTS filly. These are structured differently. So before we were talking about, we ran 6 examples and we basically used 2 sires and 6 fillies. When we go back here, I'm using 2 fillies and 2 colts. And eventually, what I would love to do is build off this. So this example compares on the left with Primetime. We get that part's probably a little bit harder to see. On the right with Churro. Again, for those people that are either just joining in now or if I didn't cover it clearly at the start, it is my opinion that the 5-match horses have less variability to the breeding reports than a 4-match horse, which has less variability than a 3-match horse, which has less variability than a 2-match horse, which has less variability than a 1-match horse. I'm excluding breeding with a 1 of 1, which is a 0 match horse, because I think the 1 of 1s actually don't have a ton of variability in them in themselves. But when you look at the 1 match and the 2 match horses, I think you're seeing some crazy variability in there, which is why I believe that. And when I'm talking about, I'm trying to isolate Ruby, my filly. I want to understand, how does Ruby compare to her first offspring? Then all I want is colts to be constant. And in this case, instead of just doing one constant, I could have just done primetime. I did primetime and churro. Now you could pick different horses. Again, primetime and churro, one's an RTS, one's an RDF. Ruby is an LTS. The archetype, I'm not paying attention to the preferences. Where LTS prefers longer distance, RDF prefers the sprint. I don't really care about that, because all I'm saying is I believe the colt is being held constant here. So I can evaluate the initial Gen 0 filly to the crop 1 filly from the Gen 0 filly. So you can see, I think in this case, the primetime chart is more helpful. Crop 1 is in blue. And Gen 0, again, Ruby itself is in red. So it's very clear to me that the crop 1 horse improved in start, it improved in speed, it improved in stamina, it improved in finish, it improved in heart. Temper looks to be the exact same as what it was. Now, if we went and pulled up the example of the horse itself, most of that's going to bear itself out. Like, you're not going to be surprised to see that. And part of this is Ruby is an A+, which was bred with an S. So of course it should be better. It went from an A+ to an S-. It had to make improvements. So when I said, we'll snap these side by side and then go back to the workbook. Oh, we can just do this. There we go. Oops. Let's snap these two side by side. So yes, the analysis tells me that the crop 1, in this case, Ruby Slipper, has better start. A+ versus S-, obvious. S speed versus A+ speed. So this is maybe where you can try to make some takeaways. I mean, it's an obvious upgrade. But if this is the difference between start is 1 subgrade, because we're talking ends at S-, started at A+. In speed, we had starts at A+, ends at S. So 2 subgrade differences. So this is a bigger jump than start. That's visually obvious as well. But how much is representative of 1/2 subgrade? And if you change your column width in Excel, you'd probably get to the same point too. Stamina started with S- stamina, stayed S- stamina. So here, going back to what we made some takeaways between Shockwave and Primetime that I thought were fairly definitive statements. Ruby has S- stamina, or sorry, Ruby Slipper has S- stamina. So does Ruby, but it's pretty clear to me that Ruby Slipper has better stamina, even if the stat grade itself is the same. And again, that's why I think this exercise is worth time, or worth doing. Finish on Ruby Slipper is S-, same as Ruby, and that one is like the exact same. Now, the range of outcomes for Ruby Slipper, both to the bad, both to the good, are wider. So do we think that means there's more variability to Gen 1 breeding? I think yes. I thought we saw that on the colt side. So if whoever missed it at the start, I think we did a pretty good job of talking that through. The range of outcomes is wider in breeding with Gen 1s. For sure, if you're breeding with 2 Gen 1s, but even if you're just breeding with 1 Gen 1. On the heart side, heart was an A for Ruby. So we went from an A to S-, 3 subgrade differences. So is this what 3 subgrade differences looks like? Obviously, I think the answer is yes. And we go from S- temper to stays at S- temper. And those two almost perfectly overlap. Like there was probably almost no change in temper. If we really zoomed in and went over there, if you want to get your tin foil hats out, I don't know if you can even see it as well as I can see it. We're going to go one more time. Like, is this what increasing 1 point in temper looks like? You can see the red bar is slightly to the left of the blue bar. The red bar is slightly to the left of the blue bar. The red bar is slightly to the left of the purple box. The blue line is slightly to the right of the purple box. Like the shape, the size of the box to me is the exact same. It's just the blue is shifted, call it 1 point to the right. So maybe that's what one radial point looks like. We'll do one on the left dirt firm, and then we'll probably wrap. Lucy, an asset class similar to Ruby, is like a A plus 20, 24, I don't know, 8.5 preferences, I believe. So if we pull up full, this is one that's got some variability to it, so it's nice. You get the S plus start, you get the A temper. So this one actually might be worth monitoring. Go to Bloodline. So again, we bred all of our LDF pieces with Shawnee Bear, the first window. Lucy's down below. 8 preferences. I lied, not 8.5. So if we get S plus start from S minus start, then even Shawnee Bear only had S start. Like clearly, Lucy in the Sky outkicked her coverage in start. That bears itself out here. Pretty obvious statement. Speed goes from an A plus to an S minus. Again, we're shifting to the right. I think the two things to note maybe there is, to me, the box is meaningfully wider for the crop 1 horse. Again, this is a breeding report of breeding Lucy in the Sky with prime time. That means if I bred those two together, 50% outcomes are spread wider. To me, that means there's more variability to Gen 1 breeding. And then when you see the whiskers, like it really underscores that, both to the bottom and to the top, and in some cases, meaningfully wider. Same thing on stamina for the outsides. This one isn't, but that's because finish just improved that much. So if we go to those two, on stamina, we went from A plus to A plus. This one's interesting then. So another one where I would say Lucy in the Sky, the full, the blue box is better. The box is wider, but there's some pretty good opportunity for success there. Now, keep in mind, the S is still your limiting factor here. Like, if right here is an S, and I know based on looking at the stat grade, it got an A plus, like it had to have fallen somewhere in here. It just has to. There's no way it can fall over here because it would be an S minus or it would be an S stat grade. So even though the box is there, the stat grade also kind of informs where you fell within that box. So you could say to Grandpa does it better, or Grandpa's do it better, this point in the chat, he correctly concluded that was a bad roll on stamina. I agree. Completely agree there. Good takeaway. If you do finish, obviously we improved there. We went from an A plus to an S. This is what going from an A plus to an S looks like, apparently. Even the worst outcome is better than the worst outcome for Lucy. The best outcome's a lot better. There's almost no overlap in the boxes at all. On Heart, S minus goes to S. Again, the box is bigger for the crop 1 full. The best outcome is actually, in one case, not better, but it's not meaningful. The worst outcome is still better. The better portion of the box is better. Then you go to temper. This is where we missed. We went from an A plus, bred with an S, and somehow got an A. This is what missing looks like. And another takeaway for Grandpa's Do It Better is, again, use the same logic. If A is over here, like we must have hit the nut low, right? This is A. This is the end of the whisker. So that's what hitting a whisker to the downside looks like. So not bitter. I'm not mad. It was a really good horse. It's something that I think is going to be very useful in trying to create horses that can truly sprint, great preferences. Since the last stream, we bred all of our LDF pieces. We used Persian Bull 21 times, which is OAB racing. And then we used One-Eyed Blind, the namesake horse, which is an LDS with 2 LDF fillies. One our own, Ape, and then one is Swift Sapphire, which is Big Brain Stables. We can pull up those 2 breeding reports quickly to show what was top of mind when we did that. Let me pull it up over here quickly. If I'm honest, the one from Swift Sapphire is nothing to write home about. It's not even a good report. The reason we did it, well, that's not an objective statement, it's a subjective statement, but I didn't think it was a report that would get me excited. And we can compare and contrast the 2, and I'll show you why I feel that way. So let me grab the one from, shout out to Big Brain Stat Boy again for being so easy to work with on stuff like this. It was a relatively complicated deal, and we still got it done. And then I need the other one. Reports. I got it. Okay, Swift Sapphire is going to be red. That again is a Scuba LDS or LDF 20 out of Big Brain's Right Dirt stable. I think their partner is NFT Brad or whatever, and that's his horse that they just manage out of the Right Dirt stable. Ape is ours. It's an Astro. It's one of the 2 top ones at LDF for fillies. I said Swift Sapphire is red. Ape is blue. They're both bred with One-Eyed Blind. So again, One-Eyed Blind is a horse that has, well, let's pull it up quick. Gen 0, give me my drop down. 2 temper. So when I said 5 temper has less variability than 4 temper, then 3 temper, then 2 temper, well, you can't have 4 temper. You know what I mean? 3 versus 2 versus 1. I think this is where you're seeing that 2 temper does have meaningfully more variability to it than what we saw with all of those primetime churro. Even what's its nuts, the retired SLDS or RDF Colt. Why can't I think of it? Shockwave. So the range of outcomes on start for Ape, again, Ape is blue, is basically like B plus to SS. And again, the box is going to fall in the middle there. And the most likely outcome looks to be S minus or A plus even. You can get above SS on the speed. Just really wide boxes and whiskers. But if you only look at the Swift Sapphire one, as opposed to comparing and contrasting them, I don't think is necessary in this case. This is actually much tighter. And that's why I don't think it feels as sexy as the Ape one. Like, yes, the start thing is still crazy. The speed thing is still crazy. But the box themselves, if this is 50% of the range of outcomes, I can almost guarantee you what stat grade I'm going to get for finish and heart, and it's going to be an S. And stamina is probably an S plus. Maybe that's an SS minus, but it's probably S plus. Temper is probably an S. So if I, before the horse is even born, I know what 4 of the stats are. You do Ape in comparison, again, not putting them side by side. much wider for start, much wider for speed, including like crazy upside to the good. And even these other ones seem to be a little bit wider than we saw here. Yeah, if you go from screen 1 to screen 2, everything's wider. So it's worth a gamble with Ape, in my opinion, and it was worth doing with Swift Sapphire. So if you go to Swift Sapphire, the horse itself, pulling it up on the other screen here quick. We're like 5 minutes from being done if there's no questions in chat. Just trying to get back to the original horse. So I'm a big fan of doing things that have done infrequently or been done infrequently or haven't been done. So Polychrome, which is an Astro LDF-S, it's slightly worse than Delta, slightly worse than Ape on paper out of YSM, has already been bred to One-Eyed Blind, but that is the only LDF horse that bred to One-Eyed Blind, the our LDS horse that we just looked at the breeding reports for. Swift Sapphire, which is the womb we bought, again, doubling down on if only one LDF had bred with One-Eyed Blind, what has Swift Sapphire done? Got to the breeding barn a little bit later, thanks to them running a little bit longer. The first one, Bloodline, went to Scott Street as Ziggy. Ziggy is known to sprint. It has S plus start, S plus speed. The other one went to Rose of Zion. Ziggy on the female side, but the stats are the same more or less, right? S plus start, S plus speed. It had S plus heart as well. The difference here is Rose of Zion has an S in temper, but the rest is the exact same. So if in the first 2 cracks, Swift Sapphire had gone Ziggy every time, because it itself is a scuba, so obviously it can't breed with scuba. It could breed with Astro. But I figured it was a worthwhile step to say none of the Scuba LDF S fillies had gone to One-Eyed Blind. I'm going to do that first. And that's why we did it. Now, as I told KKirk, when you're changing preferences, I'm breeding a LDF within an LDS. I don't think it's going to be a great racer, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing for people in our position and people that can be patient with stuff like that. So that's all I've got. Class is exiting session here. I appreciate everybody for being in the chat. I apologize for not calling people out. I know Lacey's been here since the start. T Green's been here a long time. Trot on, RVA, Doughboy, always helping out. If I didn't already say Lacey, Rolo's been here as well. I appreciate every one of you. We're doing this for you. So if there's questions that you have, topics you want us to cover, let me know. But until next time, that is going to wrap it.